You're listening to Release Your Resistance, episode 34. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. I want to tell you about someone who calls herself a writer, but I don't think that's her true calling. I think at heart, she's really a coach who just happened to stumble into writing as a way to tell people that transformation is possible and available to them. The teacher I want to introduce you to or reacquaint you with today is Jen Sincero. Her actual press bio states that she is a #1 New York Times best-selling author, speaker, and coach. And today I'm going to share with you what I have learned from her, what I like about her, and why I think she's really more of a coach than a writer. I think by now most people, or many people, have heard of her. So if you have heard of her before and read her work, I really want to know what you love about her and what you've learned from her. Or if she's just not your cup of tea, I'm curious to know why. Not to disagree with you or try to convince you otherwise, just to hear your perspective. I can't remember the very first time that I became aware of her, but I remember noticing a buzz about her, probably back in 2013 or 2014, after her third book, which many people think is her first book, came out and got so much attention. The book has a bright yellow cover, and I've heard it referred to as the yellow snowball because it just kept on gaining momentum and getting more and more popular. The title of the book is You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. And when I first heard about the book and read people's comments about how much they loved it and how good it was, my initial reaction was, nah, that's not for me. I have this thing about people using slang and swear words in professional or business settings. I think it's gimmicky and they're trying to get a reaction. So when I see that in the title of a book, my natural instinct is to be dismissive. How's that for some crazy judgy resistance, right? So even though her book's subtitle told me that she had the answer of how I could stop doubting my greatness and start living an awesome life, and this was during a time in my life that wasn't that awesome when I was, in fact, doubting my own greatness, I was like, no thanks, I'm good. I just have to laugh at myself now. How naive I was. How sure I was that my own judginess was giving me great advice. So fast forward to 4 or 5 years later when my life had already transformed into a more awesome version of itself, and I was starting to consider and experiment with my own greatness, her book popped up on the list of titles currently available in audiobook for me to borrow on my library app. And I remembered how much attention that book had received and how many people continued to recommend it so many years later. So I thought, why not? I'll give it a try. And I fell in love. Oh, what do I love about Jen Sincero? As I was listening, I realized much of her book, the yellow one, is what I have learned from my other favorite teachers. She talks so much about thought work and choosing thoughts intentionally, which I first learned from Brooke. And she also talks about getting into alignment and creating the life you want for yourself and law of attraction, which I first learned from Jess. And some might assume that it could be annoying and redundant to hear the same or similar messages repeated by a different teacher, but I have to say, I loved it. It was reassuring and familiar, and hearing her funny, fresh take on my favorite topics was so entertaining and enlightening. I really enjoyed hearing new examples and metaphors and personal anecdotes about concepts and practices that I already believed in and was already using in my own life. What do I love about Jen's writing and her narrating? Firstly, did you catch that I didn't actually read her books? I listened to them. First from the library, then because I wanted to be able to re-listen on demand without waiting my turn in line, I bought them on Audible. I highly recommend listening to her books, and I highly recommend you check out the free offerings from your local library. You can just download an app on your phone or iPad. It's so easy. I love Jen's voice so much, both her written voice, like her style of writing, and her speaking voice. It just sounds so real and authentic and true. I love how she tells stories and explains her thoughts and uses funny little expressions to describe what she means. I love when she refers to how she was the impetus and the inspiration for figuring herself out as broke as a joke. That description seems funny, but it's actually about something that's not funny. Being broke and feeling poor and scarce is not funny at all, but she describes the state of her life as broke as a joke and herself as being so tired of that at her age by the time she finally decided to turn her life around. She describes it as being unavailable to be living the way she had been living anymore. So for me, her description brings a self-depreciating quality to it, so not taking herself too seriously, while at the same time taking her decision to change very seriously. It makes me wonder, what areas in my life am I unavailable to be living the way I am currently living? Or what about you? Is there a part of your life that's just not acceptable and you are no longer available to keep living that way? The way she describes her own before in the part that she decided that she was no longer available for, it seems so raw and authentic. If it were a before and after weight loss photo, she wouldn't just be showing someone standing in front of the mirror and then 20 pounds later, the same person showing that slimmer version of themselves in the same pose in front of the mirror. No. Her before picture would be more like a shot of someone sitting on a couch, eating chips, and drinking a milkshake while binge watching reality TV, as an example. She really paints the picture of where she was and how far she's come. She describes her transformation when she finally decided that she was just going to get herself what she wanted despite her own resistance. And isn't it so interesting how resistance shows up differently for all of us? For her, apparently, she was very resistant to what she refers to as cheesy experiences. High-fiving and being in a group money seminar and shouting beliefs and affirmations. But someone else may have no resistance to that at all, but may have resistance to talking about money or charging for their services. As I've mentioned, I love listening to her self-narrated books, but while I was listening, I noticed that as she closed out a chapter, she seemed to be giving steps of lists of actions to take, and each list would end with the advice to love yourself. Great advice. But also, I am so glad that she repeatedly listed that as the last step, because that pattern, that repetition, is what made me notice there were how-to lists sprinkled throughout the chapters. And since I didn't want to try to advance and rewind around the whole audiobook to get to the end of each section to hear and transcribe that list for myself, I decided to just buy the physical copy of the book. And I am so glad that I did. When I got a hold of the hard copy and started reviewing the lists, I was reminded how perfect the advice is. And it made me want to teach a course or maybe take a course using those steps as the outline, which made me wonder if Jen already teaches those courses using those steps, so I checked her site and discovered she does offer an 8-week DIY coaching course on her website at jensincero.com. So now I'm thinking about enrolling in it. I'll let you know if I do. My all-time favorite thing that Jen has said or written is the phrase, "Life is ridiculous." She had just finished telling the story of how she was in a rock band when she had no business being in a rock band, and the moral of the story was, just see what you can get away with. She encourages us to go after life with a sense of, why not? Because after all, life is ridiculous, right? None of us know what we're doing here. I remember the first time that I heard this part of her book. I actually ended up rewinding and replaying it while I was driving because it hit me so hard and it had made such an impact on me, and I just had to listen to it again. And then when I got home that night, I replayed it again so that I could write it down. And I made it my mantra. And of course, when I ended up getting the physical copy of the book and was randomly flipping through, did I happen to flip to that page? You know I did. So, since life is ridiculous and none of us knows what we're doing here, what do you think? What could you get away with? What do you want to say, why not, about? Another favorite part of her book that hit me with such impact was her assertion that surrender is releasing resistance. Since I'm a resistance researcher and all about releasing resistance, of course, I had to replay and reread this chapter. She describes our need for control is a way to take charge of a situation, as if we could take charge of anything outside of our own brains. So instead, what if we just surrendered and let things play out and accept reality? She explains this concept with a party metaphor, and you know, I love parties and I love metaphors. Basically, she poses the question, would you rather attend a party that you're being forced and manipulated and expected to attend? Or would you attend a party where the host is sure it's going to be amazing either way, but would be so happy to have you there? I think we all know what party we want to go to, right? That forced, manipulated expectation is a sign of scarce thinking, of fear. Jen says, doubt is resistance. Faith is surrender. Worry is resistance. Joy is surrender. Control is resistance. Allowing is surrender. Thank you, Jen. I couldn't agree more. And I love the way you lay it out. And since I've apparently now redirected this episode directly to Jen, let me go ahead and deliver my thank you card, my love note, and fan letter to one of my favorite teachers. Jen, you inspire me so much for so many reasons. I am so encouraged that you openly share that your transformation started for you when you were well into your 30s and 40s, indicating that it is not too late for anyone, and there is no expectation that anyone should have figured this out any sooner. I love your blunt openness and descriptiveness that you found much of the path that eventually got you where you wanted to go cheesy at first. But you decided to embrace the cheesiness. This is such a good reminder to me when I encounter my own judginess. And thank you so much for writing and continuing to write. And may I offer, even though you're so good at it and it's brought so much success, I've heard you say in interviews that you don't really enjoy the writing process. So I thank you for pushing through that resistance so that I can read your work. But also I wonder if you know that your true genius is in transformation, not writing. You've transformed yourself. You teach others how to transform themselves. So maybe you don't have to be a writer. But secretly and selfishly, of course, I still hope that you continue to produce content in whatever medium you're called to. Okay, back to my actual listeners, and maybe Jen's listening. How would I know? Life is ridiculous, right? I am so curious to hear what you think. What are your favorite parts of Jen's writing? If you've been putting off picking up her books, are you going to give them a try? And as always, if you're one of my favorites, this week I sent you a curated list of podcast episodes featuring Jen on OPP, Other People's Podcasts. I don't even think she has her own podcast yet, but if you find out that she does, please let me know. I will listen to that. Okay, back to my favorites. Be sure to check your email for that list of episodes for you to listen to. And if you're not on my email list yet, and if you want to make sure you get notified of each new episode of this podcast, plus all the fun extra things that I send to my favorite people, just go to my website at bexb.org and look for the link that says favorites. And now I want to hear your thoughts and your reactions. Send me an email at hi@bexb.org or leave a comment in the show notes at bexb.org/Jen Sincero. That's JenSincero. Also, did you notice the cover art for this episode? So I am so excited to tell you that I collaborated with a great artist in California. Her name is Kayla. She's very sweet. We met online, and she has an Etsy shop called The Loving Living Shop, and it's on Etsy, and she does custom portraits, and so she did one for the cover art for this episode. So check out the cover art, and also check out Kayla's Etsy shop, and maybe go ahead and submit a photo of yourself or of people who you love and have her make a custom portrait for you. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about another one of my favorite teachers, and I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexb.org to see how we can work together.